Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and lock your doors. You have entered the world of the unknown. Welcome to the Dead Hour broadcast.
The silence of the Blackwood Pines was not peaceful. It was predatory. Mark realized this on his third night house-sitting the sprawling, modernist cabin made almost entirely of glass and polished concrete. It sat like a jagged splinter in the side of a mountain, miles from the nearest paved road. The owners, wealthy architects, had designed it to bring the outside in. At night, that meant the pitch-black forest pressed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching him. The first 2 days were fine. He drank expensive scotch, read, and enjoyed the detachment from city life. But on the third night, a thick fog rolled up the mountain, swallowing the trees and pressing against the glass, turning the windows into black mirrors that only reflected the minimalist interior and Mark's own increasingly jittery reflection. It started with a tapping. Tap, tap, scrape. Mark paused his movie. The sound came from the hallway leading to the master bedroom. It wasn't the settling of a new house. It was rhythmic, intentional. He walked down the hall, the polished concrete cold beneath his socks. The sound seemed to emanate from behind the drywall near the guest bathroom. "Hello?" he felt ridiculous asking. "Raccoons?" Scrape, tap. He pressed his ear against the smooth white wall. Silence. Then a sound so faint he thought he imagined it. It sounded like wet lungs exhaling, a shallow, hitching breath right on the other side of the plaster. He recoiled, heart hammering. He banged his fist on the wall. "Get out of there!" The tapping stopped. He spent the rest of the night with all the lights on, convinced an animal had gotten into the crawlspace. By day 4, the fog hadn't lifted. The isolation began to curdle in his stomach. He tried to read, but his eyes kept drifting to the walls. They felt thinner now, porous. That afternoon, while making coffee in the ultra-modern kitchen, he dropped a spoon. It clattered loudly on the counter. An instant later, from the living room wall, a perfect echo returned the sound. Clatter, clink. Mark froze, the hot water kettle shaking in his hand. That wasn't an acoustic echo. It was a mimicry, a delayed playback. He walked slowly into the living room. Is someone there? From behind the wall where the massive 8K television was mounted, a voice whispered. It was faint, like rustling dry leaves, but distinct. Is someone there? It was his own voice, not a recording, but a hollow, metallic imitation of it, stripped of emotion. Mark backed away, stumbling over an ottoman. "What the hell are you?" he shouted, his voice cracking with rising panic. A pause. Then the whisper came again, slightly louder from a different section of the wall near the fireplace. "What the hell are you?" Panic seized him. He ran to the front door, a massive slab of oak, and yanked the handle. Locked. He fumbled with the deadbolt, but it wouldn't turn. It wasn't jammed. It felt fused. He tried the sliding glass doors to the deck. They were immovable. He was trapped in a glass cage. Night fell rapidly, the fog turning from gray to an oppressive black. The cabin interior became a brightly lit stage surrounded by an unseen audience. The sounds grew bolder. It wasn't just echoing him anymore. It was murmuring, continuous, low-frequency muttering coming from every wall, ceiling, and floorboard. It sounded like hundreds of people whispering conspiratorially in a crowded room, but all the voices were bad impressions of his own. He grabbed a heavy iron fire poker from the hearth. He stood in the center of the living room, spinning, trying to locate the source. "Show yourself," he screamed at the drywall. The whispering abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was heavier than before. It felt pregnant, waiting. Then, Right behind his left ear, a voice, his own voice, but deeper, guttural, dripping with malice, spoke clearly. "We are the insulation, Mark. We keep the warmth in." He swung the poker wildly, hitting nothing but air. He ran to the guest bedroom, slamming the door, hyperventilating. He pushed a dresser against the door. He sat on the bed, knees to his chest, clutching the iron poker. He waited. An hour passed. Then he noticed the drywall opposite the bed. It was bowing outward slightly, just a fraction of an inch. He watched, paralyzed, as the plaster began to sweat. Damp patches formed, outlining a shape, a humanoid shape pressed tight against the other side of the wall, as if someone were squeezed into the narrow space between the studs. He could see the indentation of shoulders, the roundness of a head, and then, slowly, the impression of a face pressing through from the inside out. It didn't have eyes. It only had a mouth, a wide, stretching grin that began to crack the plaster. The plaster groaned under the pressure. Dust puffed out from the baseboards. Mark knew that if that wall broke, whatever was behind it wasn't going to fit in this reality. The shape pushed harder. The plaster shrieked. The mouth opened wider in the plaster mold, and a sound came out. It was Mark's own childhood laughter, distorted, slowed down, and mixed with the sound of tearing meat. Mark screamed and threw the fire poker at the wall. It punched a fist-size hole right through the plaster face. Silence. He stared at the jagged black hole. Then, a single, long, gray finger poked out through the hole. It hooked around the edge of the broken drywall and began to pull. The owners found the cabin immaculate 3 days later. The doors were unlocked. There was no sign of Mark. His luggage was packed by the door. The only anomaly was in the guest bedroom. There was a fist-size hole in the drywall. The police assumed Mark had snapped from the isolation and wandered off into the woods to die of exposure. They never looked inside the wall cavity. If they had, they might have found what remained of Mark, pulled through a hole too small for a human body, spread thin like insulation between the studs, his jaw distended in a silent, endless scream.
The story ends here, but the fear remains. If you want to survive the night, hit that subscribe button. And remember, don't look under your bed tonight.